So we're going to bring on our first guest, and she does a lot in the literary writing space. And just reading her bio, she is very active in academia as far as um, teaching writing. It looks like training other people to write. And so she has a book that's been out for a while, but it's really a very interesting title and topic. And it's called No Heaven for Good Boys. And our guest is Keisha Bush. Welcome to Black Authors Matter TV.
Thank you so much for having me, Gwen. This is really exciting. I love I love talking about books and writing, and I see myself as part of a larger legacy of writers, and especially Black writers and Black female writers, but just Black people. It's kind of radical that what was it, like maybe 150, almost 140, 50 years ago, we weren't allowed to read or write. And now look at us, you know?
Doing lots of writing. Now, are you able to turn the volume up on your device? Because
Yeah,
I heard you, but it seemed like the volume is a little bit low. And I want
yeah,
to make sure our audience can hear you. So, are you able to turn up the volume a little bit?
I did. Is this a little better?
Yes, that is
Okay,
better.
cool.
Um, so your book, No Heaven for Good Boys, when I saw the title,
Mhm.
I was intrigued by it just because it seems like it may be based on a parable or something like that.
Mhm.
But the setting is in Senegal, and I wanted to find out, do you have roots in Senegal?
So, what is so interesting? Okay. So, when Bush was elected the second time, so this was
Okay.
like 2000.
So he was originally in 2000, so that would be 2004.
Okay, there we go.
Mm-hmm.
Help me with the timeline. So when he when he got reelected, I remember the sort of collective grief that people were feeling. And I was living in Brooklyn at the time in New York City, and it was palpable. Like everybody was sad. And I was also like deeply, deeply saddened. And it was like people on the bus, there was just like no energy. And you knew it was because of the election results. And so I literally left later that month and moved to West Africa. Um, and I had been sort of planning this for a while, but I was interested. I was born in Boston, and at that time I had only spent maybe 3 years in New York. In total, who knew it would turn into 20? Um, but I just needed to get off of the continent. I needed a break. So
Okay.
Keisha went back to Africa, right? My first
Okay.
time, so afraid. But long story short, I stayed in first the Gambia and then Senegal, and it was for a total of 4 years. And when I returned back to the US, it was like a year or two before the pandemic. My mom did her DNA swab. So I understand 23andMe is going through
I was
mad
getting ready.
issues.
I was getting
Exactly,
ready.
exactly.
I was gonna say, was it on 23 and Me?
Exactly. Like delete it now. But,
Because I
you
think
know,
they're gonna be selling some of that to try to
exactly.
recoup their losses or whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
go ahead and continue.
But when my mom did do it, what we came to learn, and I like to brag, is like we are mad African. We have so many different African roots. Like I claim the whole continent as my motherland, which we all should. Okay. Like Africa is like the beginning for humanity, to be honest.
Yes.
Um, but my mom is Nigerian, Senegalese, Ghana, Leone, Congolese, and Angolan, and some North African, possibly, and definitely East African. But when I was in Senegal, we didn't know this yet, but we had the narrative. So in my family, I grew up in a house in Boston with myself, my mother, my grandmother, and my great grandmother. Great Gram was
Mm.
born like 1892, 1893, and her mom was a slave in Brazil on the sugarcane plantations. And she
Oh,
just got to a point where she was like, the slave thing is not working for me. Deuces. And she ran away and escaped. And she met this British Irish pirate, got on his boat, and I wonder like what sort of rituals and sort of protective work she was doing at that time, because they sail up to Honduras, where a lot of pirates were retiring on the island of Raton, which is why it's Anglophone, even though it's in a Latin American country in Central America. And our family moved to the US in the 60s on my mom's side. And then my mom and my dad got married like in the 70s. And my dad and his family are from North Carolina, like the roots trace back there.
okay.
And so when I went to West Africa, when I went to Senegal and the Gambia, like it wasn't a process of like, oh, I'm returning to Africa. I was like, I hope I blend in, which I did not. We don't.
Hmm.
Um,
I've heard
and
that. I haven't been yet, but I've
yeah,
heard that.
they could tell. American
Hmm.
sister.
Yeah.
Remember that so clearly. And I was like, yo, we're cool. Shh. Because when everybody swarms and they're all trying to sell you, like, the goods that they're selling. And I'm like, don't do that to me. Um, but like, I don't know. It was just such a fulfilling and expansive time for me. And I returned to the US different. Um, I wasn't a writer or even thinking about ever becoming a writer. I didn't think I was a good writer back then. And people would tell me, oh, Keisha, your emails, they bring me right there. I think I'm there. You should be a writer. And I was like, no. But when I returned to the US in 2008, I noticed how like I wouldn't move over for people on the street if I had the right of way. And I ended up in a conversation with a Central Park, and somehow we got on the topic, and she had just recently sort of understood at that time how much and how we're she and all of us are often expected to move over on a sidewalk when a white person or a group of white people are walking towards us. And I remember how like I was like, please. I just came from a space where everybody was black, and the way I saw Senegalese people move through the city was so different. They weren't looking over their shoulders. If we saw police, we didn't look twice, because like people are just not harassed like that. Not even in Gambia, where sometimes you would I didn't see this as much in Senegal, but Gambia back then, 2004, end of 2004, you could like you see cars driving and then there's like a police stop. They're not stopping you for your race. They're stopping you for a bribe. And like everybody's subjected to that. That's democratic. And I remember just like noticing these things like, oh my gosh, that's everybody. So that's a different kind of situation versus looking over our shoulders and being able to walk with your head held like as high as you can get it, and nobody's even blinking twice at you. I was like, oh my gosh, every black person needs to come here, and like see it. And Senegal has such an entrepreneurial spirit to it. So yeah.
Hmm. Now, I live in Houston.
Mm-hmm.
We walk in our neighborhood, but we don't, it's not a
Yeah.
walking city because
Yeah.
it's too big and
Yeah.
it's too hot.
Yes.
So we don't, there's a little bit of walking downtown, but um, that's not something that we really encounter because it's not like New York or DC or
Yeah.
Boston where
Yeah.
people are throngs of people walking on the streets.
Exactly.
We're in our cars.
Yeah. Like
So yeah.
Chilling.
And everybody's rude. Well, the
Yep.
newcomers are rude. I call them newcomers. We've had a lot of people move to Houston Metro in the last
Yeah.
5 years or so. I mean, just
Yep. Yep.
tens of thousands, and they can't drive. So anyway, that's
They
another
probably are from
topic.
Boston too. You know, we
I
call
mean,
the
cool.
drivers
Well, we
assholes.
see license plates from all 50 states. There are people from everywhere.
I love that.
So, but I wanted to ask about
Mhm.
uh, Senegal and what did you, when you went there,
Yeah.
you said you weren't a writer. So
Yep.
what were you thinking you were going to do professionally when you left?
Um,
Like, what was
yeah.
your undergraduate degree in, or
Yep.
what did you see yourself doing? And
Marketing.
and you must have had a major shift because you've done a lot of writing since then. So,
Yes.
so
Yes.
what were you thinking you were going to be
I
doing as a
thought
profession?
I thought so my initial goal, I so there's so we everybody knows about the YMCA. There are YMCAs all through the US, but there are YMCAs all through the world. And in New York, at least, I had found out through some friends of mine who had gone to Hong Kong through the YMCA to work with like young kids, almost like a summer camp. And they
Oh,
had met there and they were back in the States, and like all of them are doing like, I have some really cool friends, like just doing amazing things. And so I looked into it, and the International YMCA, there's one in New York City. I went on the website, looked through it, and it turns out it's all, I wouldn't call it Peace Corps, but it's for international volunteerism. And I
okay.
remember at the time, I had wanted to go to Ireland. There was one in Ireland, but I decided to just like focus on the continent, Mother Africa. And they had a program in the Gambia, they had a program in Cameroon, and a couple of other places. Ghana was the other place. So I technically, uh, they didn't, they weren't so great. They weren't so like forward about me, like, oh, go to a country you don't know the language. So I looked at Anglophone countries, which was the Gambia and Ghana. So I was supposed to spend 3 months in the Gambia, 3 months in Ghana, and I end up spending like 2 months in the Gambia because I went to Senegal. And Gambia is in Senegal. So weird with the colonial borders and all of that. They're all the same people, but they have different names now because the Gambia was colonized by the British, and then Senegal is the French. So let's move past that. Um, so I ended up going to Senegal and not moving to Ghana, and then just letting my airline ticket expire. I started dating. My boyfriend was fine. And I was like, I'm not ready to go back to the US. I got a lot going on here. And so I was working with the YMCA, sort of like in a voluntary role. And I was supposed to put together PSAs, like public service announcements, just sort of, they wanted me to do something I didn't want to do. And this was in the Gambia. They wanted me to like teach typing classes and computer classes. And I'm like, yeah, I could do that, but that's not what I came here to do. And so since it's misaligned, I'm leaving because Dakar, which is the capital city of Senegal, is popping off. Like I mean, just beautiful, is full of life. Again, that entrepreneurial spirit is there. And so I reached out to the head of the YMCA in Senegal, in Dakar, and he let me move from the YMCA in Gambia to Dakar. And then I called up a friend of mine who's Senegalese he's in New York. And I was like, hey, I need a place to stay. Do you have family there? He's like, let me talk to my mom. So then I ended up staying with his family, and his sister had just come back from New York. And since they had been in school here in the US since middle school, she spoke like fluent English. She spoke New York English. So I had a translator as I tried around, took a French class, A Senegalese man connected me. He was like, "Oh my God, you need to meet my friend or my colleague, Dominique." And I was like, "Oh, you want me to meet a white French man? Okay." And then he sets us up to meet, and I see a black woman from Atlanta. Like, of course. And so I got connected to like the black American expat community. And I can't sit still for too long. So I ended up English as a second language. There is a lot of universities have other sites in different countries. So Suffolk University here in Boston has a campus in Dakar, and they have a campus in Spain. And like NYU, New York University, has campuses in like in New School to Paris, Japan. So a lot of the schools have been doing that, I would say, in the last 20 years. So like I found work and then I was just living my best life, I'll be honest.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Um, did you expect to stay as long as you did?
No, I didn't. And but I'm glad that I created the obstacle that caused me to stay, which is letting airline ticket expire. So then I couldn't come home and having to find a way to land on my feet, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Because a traumatic experience back here in the US that pretty much triggered, along with the Bush reelection, find like who I was, that person who has that drive. And I was struggling. I was afraid of making decisions.
Now, does that YMCA program still exist?
It actually might. Let me Google it. I
Because
love,
that would be some useful information for people,
yes.
people who might want to do some study abroad or just travel,
Yes.
where it's organized travel,
Yep.
where they can connect with a US based entity just because
Yep.
familiarity with US systems and customs and that kind of thing, even though
Yep.
you're in another country. So I
Yep.
didn't I didn't know the YMCA had that. I know there's some others like study abroad programs, and there used to
Mhm.
a friend of mine was in her first job out of college was it Youth for Understanding or something like that.
Mm.
Anyway, I don't even know if they still exist, but it was a study abroad. Well, it brought students to the United States from other countries.
Okay.
It was one of
Okay.
those where the
Yep.
students could come here and live with a family
Okay.
for X number of months or whatever.
Yeah. The YMCA, one little detail that I forgot actually to add was once I like applied, went through the process, and the YMCA in the Gambia, like I was accepted, right? Like you go through the process to get accepted. The YMCA, I feel like I might be quoting this wrong, but I really feel like it was a YMCA in North Carolina or in the Carolinas or Alabama, one of the two. I'll have to check emails, but they put money together for me to buy my ticket to
Oh,
be able to
okay.
fly over, so
Okay.
there's definitely support for this. So just look up like, why
Well, I didn't
um
want to do it now just because we
I
have a limited
know.
amount of time and we want to talk about your book.
Yes,
So, we only have about 7 minutes left. So we
I
want to talk
know.
about your book,
Yep.
No Heaven for Good Boys. And do you have a copy of it handy?
I do. Where is it?
I wanted to put
Oh, there we
the
go.
cover on the screen and you can tell the audience what your book
Hello.
is about. I know it's the setting is in Senegal, and I
Yes.
saw that, and I said, that's a title. Just the
Yeah.
words that whoever created the title put together to make a title.
Yes.
It sounds like a parable,
So
or
No Heaven for Good Boys. My elevator pitch is basically it's a modern day retelling of Oliver Twist. But my Oliver is Black, Muslim, and lives in Africa because he's African. He's Senegalese.
Okay.
And when I started writing it, I didn't have that in mind. It was in a class, a workshop, a writing workshop that a classmate was like, "This is like a modern retelling of Oliver Twist." And I'm like, "Yes, that's exactly what it is." Thank you for that. Man, your
Okay.
classmates,
And
be
that
brilliant
ended up being your
sometimes.
tagline, or
Yeah.
one of them. Mhm.
And so the title is literally is a it's a title of irony. Um,
Mm.
so because my Senegal is like 96, maybe 97% Muslim, although there's a very strong Christian community there. And what I love about Senegal is you get all the holidays. You get the Muslim holidays and the Christian holidays. I am like, sign me up. We get the Buddhist and the Jewish holidays too. Like, let this be everybody's land. I am for it. Um, and so within Islam, and I practiced Islam as a kid when my mom remarried her second husband, and or when she married her second husband. And so in being in moving from Christianity to Islam, one of the things that when I was 12 years old was this understanding that like when men die and they were a good person, they go to paradise where they get 72 virgins. And I remember being 12 and being like, okay, I'm a virgin and I'm not going to be one of 72 for some dude, for some man. And I didn't understand it. My context was through the understanding of a 12-year-old. But it actually triggered something for me when we think about like Christianity and Islam, and this idea that we're told to suffer and not fight for equity because we will be redeemed in the afterlife. And there is sort of a struggle with that, right? Especially as Black people, as marginalized people in a country that has always been like, oh, you want things too fast. You want equity too fast. You want justice too quickly. You just have to sit and wait. And so for these young kids who are real children, actually, they're called the Taliban, and they're often given to a religious leader who is running a school, and young children, they can memorize the Quran between like 3 and 5 years. But instead of truly teaching these children, it's become a custom to literally put on the garb of a Marabu, like a man of God, dark sunglasses, and collect children and then force them to beg. So it's a modern day slavery situation, and the estimates are that there are 50 to 100,000 boys who are subjected to this. They claim between the ages of 5 and 15, but I babies as young as 3. And it
Oh.
just stuck with me when I moved back to the US, and the boys stuck with me. I was their banana girl. So they would see me and they'd be like, ah, shh, they'll talk to each other real quick and they're like, ah, that's her. Banana, banana, banana. And everybody's like, what in the world is going on? But it was because I could afford at the time bananas for like $2, because I was on a budget also. Um, but yeah, and so like this book, No Heaven for Good Boys, it's a play on here are children are innocent, even when they're acting up.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so they're being told, be a good boy, and yet their daily life is suffering. And they have parents, they're not orphans. Oftentimes, the families are sort of not really coerced, but pressured to give their children away. And so, when Senegalese people in the south of Senegal started to learn that their children were being abused, and this is while I was still in Senegal, these teachers, these men, started crossing the border into Mali and Burkina Faso. And, and then that's when it became a problem, sort of internationally, because if you bring children across a border, now that's trafficking. But
Hmm.
because it was in country, it wasn't considered so.
Oh,
But
okay.
it's still modern day slavery. So I mean, it took 10 years, actually 11 years from the start of the first draft. I rewrote it because I didn't know what I was doing the first time. I It's so interesting because like as a as a culture, we like things really fast, and we don't realize sometimes it can take to really like hone in on your skill and get it to a point. And I was determined. um only only for the boys. I want a Taliban boy who was a Taliban at some point, that when he grows up, whether he's reading a French version of it or the English version, to realize that someone loved him, that he was loved, and that there is a space in this world for his story.
Hmm. Well, Keisha, we're at the end of our time.
Yeah,
It's a fascinating story. And I hope people get the book and learn more about this whole aspect of Senegalese culture.
yeah,
And it doesn't sound like it's even limited necessarily to Senegal. So show your book cover again. No Heaven for Good Boys. And it's
exactly.
available wherever books are sold.
Yeah,
And congratulations on that and all your fellowships. I didn't get a chance to talk about
yeah.
that, but go online and I think your website is yourname.com.
It
Yes,
is KeishaBush.com.
KeishaBush.com.
Yep.
And you can learn more about all the different writing things that she's doing. You're doing a
Yeah.
bunch of stuff for somebody who didn't plan to be a writer.
Yeah. Exactly. Yes.
So the
Like,
opportunity's there.
we have super skills, and our experience brings so much. Never think that you can't do something. At least try. But you try, you really need to give it your best shot. And it took me
Mhm.
10 years to give this my best shot, and it was worth it.
Well, I
So,
agree with you because
yeah.
I've had many people come on the show and say they took 20 years, some of them
Yep.
20 years to write a book. So
Yep.
I know what
Yep.
that means. And I'm a writer myself, so
Yep.
I won't go into that because that would be another topic. But anyway, thank you so
Yeah.
much, Keisha, for
Thank
being a guest
you.
on Black Authors Matter TV. And
Absolutely.
um, keep traveling. It sounds like you've just,
Mm.
you know,
Yep.
done
I'm
so
about
much.
I'm about to bust out of here again. I'm heading to the UK, maybe, or Nairobi. But one last thing, go to my website if you want to reach out to me directly. Um,
Okay.
that little like for more information or contact me,
Or
you
the
can literally email me through that and it'll come to my email. So
okay.
folks, yeah. All right.
All right.
Thank
Well,
you so
thanks
much,
again for being
Gwen.
a guest
All
and
right.
all the best to you.
All right. Bye.
Okay. Good night.